In the depths of the distant past, when the world was wild, warm, and completely dominated by gigantic reptiles, there was an extraordinary balance between continents and oceans. The tropical forests breathed green, animals of all shapes and sizes weaved through the dense undergrowth, and huge creatures with wings like sails soared from the sky. Among them walked majestic horned beings, their presence undulating across the landscape like a myth, silent, strong, and yet utterly real. Above the treetops, the heavens were ruled by winged monsters, combing the surface of the sea with their beaks, while under their shadows flew colorful birds with piercing eyes. While mammals still clung to the shadows of history, hidden under leaves and stones, one thing was clear: the planet was in someone else's hands. However, clouds were slowly gathering over this perfect world. An uninvited guest appeared in the sky. At first, only a tiny spark between the stars. Later, a smudge of light that grew stronger night after night. None of the creatures of that time had any idea what was coming. None of the horned giants raised their heads in fear. None of the winged titans changed their course of flight. But the universe had a different plan. This story takes us to the last days of an era, a world full of life that didn't know that its last chapter was taking place. The landscape that once surrounded the Yucatan Peninsula was a world full of movement and life. Dozens of pterosaurs with massive horns and wide collars swept along the coast, weaving through the dense tropical forest in search of fresh vegetation and water sources. However, they were not the only ones who walked the land here. Beneath their feet hopped colorful ogiraptosaurs, small feathered birds of prey that were more observers than threats. Rustling could be heard in the treetops. Small mammals tried to avoid predators and remain invisible in a world dominated by others. Above this scenery moved gracefully the Quetzalcoatlus, one of the largest flying creatures that ever roamed the sky. The air carried its massive wings from island to island, while the daily struggle for survival took place beneath it. Life was felt everywhere. Amphibians, turtles, and fish swam in the rivers. Small reptiles glided in the muddy shores, and the first species of birds flew in the air, slowly separating from their ancient ancestors. Dinosaurs were not just an episode, they were the result of almost 200 million years of evolution. From the first small bipedal reptiles of the late Triassic to gigantic sauropods, tearful theropods, and armored defensive herbivores. Their diversity was unparalleled, and their domination covered virtually every ecosystem on the planet. From dry deserts to lush jungles, from land to shallow seas, dinosaurs have adapted to any environment and have become masters of natural selection. At the end of the Cretaceous period, however, their era reached its peak, and, as is often the case in the history of life on Earth, it was at this peak that the forces that would end their reign began to accumulate. Although dinosaurs ruled the planet like no other group of animals before them, they were not prepared for what was to come. At first glance, only something resembling a star appeared, a faint light in the night sky. Gradually, however, it began to strengthen. While the world below lived unconscious, this light turned into a bright sphere that grew in size and menacing. The asteroid, 15 kilometers in diameter, hurtled through space at a speed of 25 kilometers per second directly towards Earth. No one could have known, no eyes at that time understood the danger. No instinct warned of this heavenly murderer. But the path was clear and relentless. When the asteroid finally arrived, it headed precisely into shallow waters off what is now the Gulf of Mexico. The impact that followed changed the course of life on Earth forever. The moment the asteroid touched down on Earth, it exploded with energy that the human mind could hardly imagine. He landed in a shallow tropical sea less than a short distance from where a herd of pterosaurs had just moved. The shock wave, which was immediately released, swept away everything within a radius of hundreds of kilometers. The air turned to flame and a heat. Within seconds, every creature within radiant heat burned up. That power was greater than the 4.5 billion atomic bombs from Hiroshima. And that was only in the first second. In addition to the heat itself, a huge shock wave followed, which moved at the speed of sound in all directions. Forests were razed to the ground. Entire coastal areas were swallowed up by mega tsunamis that rolled from the Gulf of Mexico across both American continents. The ground shook to its foundations. Waves of seismic energy disrupted tectonic plates, triggered massive earthquakes, and tore apart the planet's surface. Some areas collapsed, others erupted lava. On that day, all hell broke loose. Literally, the asteroid impact released a huge wave of infrared radiation that traveled through the atmosphere at the speed of light. Every organism within reach was immediately burned. It was no better in the more distant areas. The heat set fire to terrestrial vegetation over huge areas, and that meant only one thing: megafires. Forests over hundreds of kilometers turned into flames that spread uncontrollably. The flames consumed everything: the trees, the soil, and the animals that lived in them. Hot ashes fell from the sky. The earth turned into a cauldron of fire. The animals that survived the first impact tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The dinosaurs, who had been peacefully chewing leaves just a moment ago, were now suffocating in smoke or trapped in flames. Reptiles, birds, and mammals sought shelter, but only a few succeeded. This world, once so green and alive, turned into a scorched wasteland in a matter of hours. While the flames raged on the ground, huge amounts of dust, ash, and acid aerosols entered the atmosphere. The sun hid behind an impenetrable veil, and the world fell into darkness. This darkness was not transitory. It lasted months, maybe years. The temperature dropped, plants stopped photosynthesizing, and food chains collapsed. The air was cold, acidic, and full of fine particles. The rain that fell to the ground was full of sulfuric acid. The forests that were still standing began to die. The seas became cloudy, and phytoplankton disappeared from aquatic ecosystems. The Earth was literally plunged into a nuclear winter. The loss of sunlight caused the planet to cool drastically, and most life forms were unable to adapt to such a sudden and devastating change. What did not start with heat was finished with frost and darkness. When forests collapsed and plants began to die en masse, it was herbivores who felt the effects first. Gigantic sauropods, giant triceratops, and smaller horned dinosaurs had nothing to eat. Those who were still alive staggered through the countryside in desperate search of food, but they grew weaker by the day. They could not survive without vegetation, and when they fell, so did their predators. The bodies of dead dinosaurs were torn apart and eaten by scavengers, but soon they also had nothing to eat. Carnivorous theropods whether they were smaller hunters or gigantic predators, were starving. Without prey, there was no chance of survival. Some may have tried cannibalism. Others were looking for food among the leftovers. But day by day, their numbers were decreasing. Every day brought another death. Exhaustion, hunger, cold, and a poisoned environment. Death was slow, silent, relentless. While the land was burning and cooling, another form of apocalypse was taking place in the oceans. The huge amount of sulfur dioxide and other acidic substances released after the asteroid impact and subsequent fires mixed with atmospheric moisture and fell back to Earth as acid rain. It dramatically acidified not only the soil but also the oceans. Seawater became a toxic environment in which entire groups of animals could no longer survive. Creatures that built shells from calcium carbonate, such as corals, clams, oysters, and sea snails, collapsed. Their bodies were breaking down in the acidic environment, and their food chains began to collapse. When phytoplankton, which were the basic food for many marine organisms, disappeared, the entire oceanic pyramid of life began to collapse. And with it, its top predators disappeared. In this darkness and destruction of the sea, even the rulers of the oceans began to disappear. The dreaded mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, huge predators of the Cretaceous seas, were suddenly without food. No fish, no ammonites, no anything to hunt. These predators, which dominated the depths of the sea for millions of years, disappeared from the face of the earth as quickly as an asteroid fell. They were too big, too dependent on a stable food chain, and too specialized at the top of their food web. Just like on land, size and strength proved not to be a guarantee of survival in the seas. Those who needed a lot of food had no chance. Those who were overly specialized could not change their way of life fast enough. And so these kings of the oceans also found their end, not with an explosion, but with the silence of the deep. While the large animals disappeared one by one, the small and inconspicuous survivors found loopholes to hide. Mammals, small, inconspicuous, and adaptable, have survived. Hidden in burrows, under stones, or in the shade of forest, devastated by destruction, they survived the worst period. While many species have disappeared, some lineages have survived, including those that will later lead to primates and eventually humans. A similar fate befell some birds that were direct descendants of small theropod dinosaurs. Although many groups of birds have died out, certain branches, such as ratites and the first forms of ducks, have survived. Thanks to their beaks, the ability to search for food in different environments, or the ability to fly longer distances, they found a way to survive. It was these survivors who were at the birth of birds as we know them today. After years of darkness and cold, the sun once again began to break through the dust in the atmosphere. The ground slowly melted, the acid rain receded, and new vegetation began to creep to the surface. With it came new forms of life. Mammals, once merely surviving, began to spread and diversify. New groups were formed: marsupials, insectivores, primates. Within a few million years, they filled the gaps left by the dinosaurs. And with them, the whole character of the planet has changed. The ages that followed are called the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. In place of the once powerful creatures with horns, teeth, and tailwings, came furry runners, night hunters, and thinking creatures. The earth was not destroyed. It was just transformed. And it was this transformation that paved the way for our own creation. While most dinosaurs and marine reptiles disappeared from the face of the earth, certain groups of reptiles escaped. Almost 80% of all turtle species survived, and it was from them that the lines we know today arose. Crocodiles were equally successful. Their ability to survive long periods without food, their ability to hide in muddy rivers, and their overall low metabolic requirements have secured them a place in the New World after the catastrophe. Although their kingdom looked quite different, they were able to adapt and continue their evolution in the Cenozoic. Even more surprising is the success of amphibians. These small, often overlooked creatures were master-adapted. Wet places to hide provided them with plenty of hiding places, and many species managed to survive the worst of times. Their resilience has allowed them to become an important part of newly forming ecosystems, both on land and in river systems. The catastrophe that struck the Earth was not just about the extinction of individual species, it was the total collapse of entire ecological systems. Food chains that had been functioning stably for millions of years collapsed in a matter of months. When the plants disappeared, the herbivores died. When the herbivores fell, there was nothing to hunt. Scavengers could only feed for a certain period of time. After that, the land remained barren. On land and in the sea, there has been an ecological reset. Entire ecosystems had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Each surviving life form faced a new unknown world, dark, cold, sour, and full of uncertainty. It took hundreds of thousands of years for the situation to stabilize to such an extent that a new colonization of nature began. The story of the discovery of the crater itself is a fascinating adventure of science. In the year 1970, geologist Walter Alvarez and his father Luis Alvarez came up with the hypothesis that the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous was caused by something extraterrestrial, an asteroid impact. Their proof was a thin band of clay rich in iridium, a metal common in asteroids, but rare on Earth. Although no corresponding crater was found at first, the clues multiplied. In 178, geophysicists Glenn Penfield and Antonio Camargo stumbled upon a huge magnetic anomaly while mapping the east coast of Mexico. They had no idea that they had just discovered the Chicxulub crater. It wasn't until 12 years later that the crater began to be confirmed as the actual impact site, and the evidence piled up. Shocked quartz, tektites, and iridium-rich layers all pointed to a single moment of destruction. Although Chicxulub remains the most likely cause of the end of the dinosaurs, the scientific world is exploring other possibilities. One of the main alternatives is massive volcanic activity in the Deccan Trap area in present-day India. These lava flows covered vast areas and released huge amounts of greenhouse gases and toxins into the atmosphere. Some scientists believe that the asteroid may have intensified these eruptions. Another theory is that there will be more asteroid impacts in a short span of time, or a dramatic drop in sea level at the end of the Cretaceous that disrupted ocean currents and stable climatic conditions. Perhaps it was a combination of several catastrophes that took place almost simultaneously in an unfortunate sequence, and it was their interplay that sealed the fate of the dinosaurs. After the catastrophe that wiped the dinosaurs off the face of the planet, the Earth was left dark, cold, and full of debris. But it was in these ruins that something new began to be born. Mammals, which until now had played only a minor role in the history of life, began to spread quietly but inexorably. Small, inconspicuous creatures that survived thanks to their adaptability soon became the dominant group of terrestrial vertebrates. In the first million years after the impact, the ancestors of today's marsupials, insectivores, and even the first primates appeared. Many of them were able to move through the trees, avoid predators, and find new ecological niches left empty by the dinosaurs. A new era has begun in a world without giant lizards, and mammals have been its main actors. While non-avian dinosaurs became completely extinct, their descendants with feathers survived. Birds. However, not everyone was so lucky. Many groups, such as enantornithines or hesperornithiforms, have disappeared. But some lions, runners, ducks, fowls were able to hold on. It was these groups that became the basis of today's bird world. In the new recovering environment, the birds adapted quickly. Some of them turned into giant flightless runners, others focused on the aquatic environment, and others returned to the treetops. Evolution continued at a rapid pace, and birds soon became as diverse as their dinosaur ancestors had been. With the advent of the Cenozoic, the planet changed, not only in the terms of fauna, but also flora. After the destruction of a large part of the plant species, the planet turned green again, and this time in a different way. Tropical rainforests have spread all over the world. Trees with flowers, fruits, and new structures dominated the landscape. These changes have also enabled new forms of cooperation between plants and animals, such as pollination by insects and the dispersal of seeds by mammals or birds. Mammals and birds began to diversify into hundreds of new forms. Some have adapted to the aquatic environment, others have taken to the air, others have become great runners or tree acrobats. All these new life forms had one thing in common. They used the space left by the dinosaurs and created a completely new biological world. The story of Chicxulub is not only a fascinating chapter of the distant past, it is also a warning. Our planet has already experienced 5 mass extinctions, and today many scientists are warning that we are facing a 6th. This time, however, it will not be caused by an asteroid, but by ourselves. Habitat destruction, climate change, pollution, and overhunting are leading to massive species declines around the world. Chicxulub has shown that life is resilient, but he also reminded us how quickly what seems eternal can disappear. Dinosaurs have ruled the planet for longer than most people can imagine, and yet it only took one moment to end it all. We have a choice today. Either we protect the world we live in, or we witness its next collapse. The catastrophe that swept away the dinosaurs didn't just leave a crater. It also left a geological and paleontological footprint that scientists are now carefully studying. A thin layer of iridium-rich clay found around the world acts as a time seal, a kind of global tombstone for the Cretaceous period. It contains not only iridium, but also glass grains called tektites. and above all, shocked quartz, a crystal that is formed only under extreme pressure. All of these are evidence that the Earth has experienced something extraordinary. In many fossil sites, scientists observe a rapid transition. Typical Cretaceous creatures disappear above this layer, and completely new species of mammals, birds, plants appear. This transition is not gradual. It is sudden, dramatic, and global. Thanks to these traces, science can now reconstruct one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the planet. The idea of Chicxulub missing our planet is fascinating. If the impact had not happened, it is almost certain that dinosaurs would have continued to rule the planet. Mammals would remain small nocturnal creatures, and birds would never have spread to such a variety. Our own development might not have even begun. If the asteroid had missed Earth, we probably wouldn't be following this story today because we simply wouldn't exist. It is a cautionary tale about the fragility of life, about the inevitability of change, but also about the incredible power of nature, which can rise even from the worst. Birds, mammals, trees, all this is a continuation of a planet that has experienced its greatest test and has not broken. And we are part of it. Maybe it's time to remind ourselves of that again. If you liked the video, I will be very happy if you like it. Write a comment and consider subscribing. Every new subscriber helps keep this project alive and moves it forward. Thank you for watching to the end.